Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm Mary Fran Johnson, Executive Director of CIO Programs here at IDG, and I have the great privilege today to be interviewing Sanjay Sringapur, who is the CIO of Ernest and Julio Gallo Winery. Sanjay is an executive with a broad IT experience in industries ranging from consumer product goods and the wine industry to insurance, high-tech manufacturing, professional services, and software consulting. He joined Gallo Winery in 2014 and was promoted to CIO the following year. Gallo, as many of our viewers probably know, is one of the world's largest family-owned winemakers. It got its start in 1933 in Modesto with the famous brothers Ernest and Julio. Today, Gallo owns 15 wineries and 16,000 acres of California vineyards and is the leading U.S. exporter of California wines with more than 90 brands under its name. As CIO, Sanjay leads a 300-plus person global information services team and is responsible for all the elements of enterprise IT delivery and support around the world. Before his current role, Sanjay held IT leadership positions at Voya Financial and ING Bank. Welcome. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yes. And as I should also tell our audience, as we are going through our Q&A here, you are most welcome to join in. We're watching the Twitter feed at CIO Online. And if you would like to send in a question for Sanjay, we'll get alerted to it on this end. So I've got a few questions for you. I have to start out telling you that I love that Ernest Hemingway quote that wine is the most civilized thing in the world. So let me start with a very civilized 50,000-foot question for you about how IT is actually changing the wine industry for consumers, for growers, for distributors, for producers like Gallo. What kind of changes is technology bringing about?
Well, when I think of technology in the wine industry, I think of it from two perspectives. One is the making of wine and growing of the grapes. You're seeing a significant amount of IoT sensor technology as well as analytics being used in that space. So it's really changing how we think about growing grapes, how we apply irrigation practices, how we apply geospatial imaging to help gain insights on the growing side. On the making, you've got more modern MESs, the brilliant factories, the managing of flow from traditionally doing a large-scale wine production for one brand to maybe doing, 20 smaller brands from a volume perspective, but still achieving the same economies of scale that you were when you were doing the one, 20 million case brand in one go. So that's where technology is being applied. And on the sales side, with our distributors and our sales partners, what we're applying is more of a prescriptive model through analytics on where a consumer needs to be activated, how do we sell to them, how do we get our wine on the shelf, how do we get our wine in the consumer's lexicon so that when they're doing their purchases either through the store, online, or directly from the retailer, they're buying Gallo product, or at least they have the opportunity to buy Gallo product. So that's where all the technology is kind of being impacting right now.
Well, and I think it's probably a no-brainer to see how that's working on the consumer side and even the distributor side. But I don't think a lot of us realize how much data collection is going on the agriculture side.
Yes. I mean, to be honest with you, that was one of the things that I had a very big epiphany when I joined Gallo. Initially,
you came in from the financial side, you were used to tons of data.
Yeah, but I didn't realize that the scale of data that we're talking about, the pervasiveness of sensors, IoT in the fields, and the ag side, it's amazing. And using that data complexity and that vastness of the data to generate insights is a big challenge, because sometimes you've got information overload, and how do you segment it, how do you analyze it, how do you stratify it in such a way that you can actually generate that one insight that will help you either save money or predict market conditions.
Okay. Well, how far along is, when you think about industries and the pace at which they digitize. You think of finance and insurance, having been at this for a long time. We see a lot of it happening in much more rapid timeframes in healthcare these days. But in the wine industry overall, is it well along the path to digital transformation, or is Gallo kind of leading the way as the biggest one?
Well, it's interesting, right? So as a whole, I think we're doing okay. We're proceeding along that path pretty rapidly, but the way I approach that question of are we leading the pack or are we behind, I've not really framed that way in my mind. I'm looking at it more from a individualized perspective of business capabilities that we're chasing. So if I'm chasing an analytics capability in the ag space, I think we're doing very well. We might be leading the pack, we might not. I'm not so sure, but we're meeting our business needs, and in fact, we're ahead of our business partners in many ways in that space, in helping them come up with what are the new business models, what are the platforms that we need to be chasing. In certain other areas like AI in supply chain or blockchain, those areas I've specifically taken the approach for Gallo as such to be fast followers. Let that technology mature, let that technology evolve, and then we'll rapidly implement it when the business case and the business needs arise that we can truly incorporate in terms of growing the top line or improving our bottom line perspective. Now, on the sales and distributor side, I think in many ways we are leading the pack. I think we are very data rich. We're driving a technological foundation for prescriptive sales call of the future, which is rare, right? And our ability to have that insight because of the ecosystem of data that we gather from our distributors, from our suppliers, our distributors and retailers, helps us gain insights on market opportunities that we can then serve up to our sales force.
Well, I remember being surprised and impressed a few years ago, learning about the way Gallo was using drones in the vineyards to gather all kinds of information from the crops. And this was a few years before you really heard about anybody, delivering packages with it or checking out disaster sites for insurance companies.
That has been, to be honest with you, Mary Fran, the biggest kind of area that we've noticed IoT being applied in a mass way. It's the ag space. It's such a fertile space. Drones is one thing, but then there's
we
sensors
think of
in the
Internet
field.
of Things and we think of factory floors. You don't think of the floor of a valley.
That's right.
With a lot of vines.
Sensors for irrigation controls, sensors for measuring plant health, all of these kinds of things, imaging sensors, automated tractors, all of these things, automated picking, all of these things are being researched today. While most of these are probably not ready for production right away, they will be pretty quickly. And the amount of investment, not just that Gallo's doing, but also other companies are doing, is pretty substantial. When you start looking at the competitive landscape, there's a lot of companies chasing technology innovation in the ag space, whether it's automated tractors or automated destemmers or picking machines, all different types of stuff from a robotics perspective there, but also applying sensor technology to chase the holy grail, as they say, right? So can we improve quality? Can we measure the health of one vine?
Yes.
Through sensor. Now that's sounds
kind of like
very science fiction type
Well, it's
stuff,
like the dream of mass customization, the
Exactly.
idea that you can drill down to a tiny view on just one thing out of all that data.
But at the same time, that's where we aspire to be. But that's not where the technology is currently. But it's a good goal for us to kind of, when we're looking at technology in the ag space and how do we help drive the overall efficiencies in growing grapes, that would be where I think IoT is making a big impact.
Okay, excellent. Well, and we mentioned already that you joined Gallo from the financial industry 4 years ago now, and I just recently heard you tell the story of what you did for your first 90 days on the job.
Yeah.
Tell that story.
So it was interesting, right? When I joined Gallo, I needed to learn the business, and the CIO at the time had put together a onboarding plan that for the first 90 days was all about meeting and greeting a lot of folks within the company, all the way from the VP to actual individual contributors across all functions, and spending a day in a life with many of them, all the way from when the grapes get picked to merchandising at a retailer to seeing how our warehouses run, how our put away happens, what our marketing department does, what our creative department does, looking at all of those pieces. And what that did for me was it allowed me to quickly absorb the business without an agenda of applying technology to fix it, right? It was just about learning.
You weren't going out there with the problem list that you knew IT needed to solve.
Exactly. I went in with a perspective of, I'm a blank slate. I just need to learn how this ecosystem that is Gallo, of multiple entities with the winery at its center, functions. And then me being a technologist and a CIO, automatically you start seeing where you could apply technology, where you could make small improvements that could potentially drive significant benefits for the business. And what this did also for me was put me in a sense from the beginning of not being IT, but being the business.
Yeah.
Right? Looking at it as I'm steering the business.
Yep.
It isn't about I need to go to the business and talk to them. Hey, what are your requirements? What are the capabilities you should be chasing?
Right. That's old school
right.
CIO.
So what we could do there is my interactions and then changing the department's interactions to more of a, hey, have you thought about this? I'm seeing this in your day in a life. How do we make that better? And then I'm seeing maybe AI come up or blockchain come up or machine learning come up. And then instead of talking about how we need to apply machine learning, talk about the business outcome that we want to achieve in that day in a life. And then machine learning is an automatic tool that you use.
Here's how we enable that.
Exactly.
Yep. Well, and that it strikes me, I've heard over the years, there's been so much conversation about IT people learning to speak in the language of the business and all that. And I think for a long time, people might have thought that just meant knowing a few things about spreadsheets and financial terms, but it's very different. It's really about understanding what the business is trying to accomplish and then slotting technology into the right places to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. That's exactly how I look at IT at Gallo. Our job is in many ways to help shepherd the company through a vastly undulating, changing environment of technological innovation that is driving in the last 10 years.
Driving everything. Yeah.
So we need to help our business navigate it, incorporate it, but also challenge them on disruptive technologies that could change our business model. We need to now start thinking from an IT perspective as not a CIO, but as the entrepreneur who owns the business.
Yes.
And have a clarity of vision of how these things could potentially disrupt your overall technology and your business model. Give
me an example of some way that you've accomplished that, something that you kind of have added that to your toolbox of something you were able to bring to Gallo.
So when we were looking at some of this, right, it's take a look at what we did with the mobile scheduling application, for example.
Yes,
right?
That's been written up.
That was it's been written up, and where we were able to help our grower reps, schedule harvest pickups and harvesting of fields.
And this is an iPad.
It's an iPad-enabled, completely mobile-first application, right? What is that? Is this revolutionary? In some ways, no, but it feels revolutionary because it took something that used to take many, many hours to do. Is that time has now been shrunk? It's mobile enabled. And you can do it anywhere. You've applied a technology to basically take a painful process in a day in a life and made it easy or easier. It's never going to be painless, but it's easier. As we go down this path, that is an application of technology at a what I call a day in a life improvement level. Another way of thinking is, well, how do we want to apply technology to be prescriptive? That's more revolutionary from a sales perspective, right? We're gathering all this data. Let's say in a 5-mile radius, I have all the stores that Gallo product is being sold to because they're sending me their depletions data.
Okay.
And I get point of sales data from Nielsen or some of the other areas for these retailers. How do I then incorporate all these various nuggets of information into finding out, hey, should we be selling in one of our brands into this particular store because 2 other restaurants open next to it and they've been already selling our brand.
Right. Kind of insight in a contextual way.
In a contextual way. That and not just generating that insight, creating a platform that makes that insight prescriptive to a salesperson with financial incentives driven within that platform for that salesperson to go execute that piece. So it's thinking about that from a complete holistic life cycle of the sales call of the future. That is also how we're looking. But if you noticed, I didn't talk about technology at all.
No, and I was thinking that also wasn't something that you just created using technology people for the input. No. So how talk about how you put that together. That sounds like an agile project with business people involved as well.
Yes. But so it's not. So I don't want to take credit for putting it all together. Right. I'm part of a team. We've built a culture where IT partners with our business, but partners it's not strong enough. It's more we're integrated, even though IT is a centralized function and sales might be a centralized function or creative might be a centralized function or winemaking might be a centralized function. But we've created such a partnership through the cadence of interaction that we've established, whether it be through my staff meetings or through their staff meetings, and making sure that those calendars and that cadence is synced together. It creates a logical way of not having to wait on each other for requirements or money or resources. We start on day one talking about what is your roadmap, what is the capabilities, what are the technologies. Then we evolve that discussion down to the next level, which is, okay, what does this lead to in terms of projects that we want to go chase? Okay, how many of these projects require, what does the team look like for these projects? And we're not talking IT team or business team. We're just saying a total team to achieve a certain business outcome.
Okay.
Then from there, we go into, okay, now where does this team and this project that we've talked about for your area align with all the other business projects that we're talking about, all the other capabilities? Where does it fall in the prioritization list? And this isn't done in isolation between me and one person. It's done as a community together. Yeah. So when I draw the line on a budget and say, or a capacity problem and say, look, I've got only this much capacity and only this much work, I don't abdicate my leadership by saying, you decide what my priority is.
Right.
I decide it with them together in complete partnership with the pros and cons.
Well, I like that. I love that phrase, cadence of interaction. It also sounds a lot to me like a very kind of boots on the ground form of governance.
It is.
Okay.
It is. It's so this is an interesting thought from my perspective. What is the role of the CIO, right? Is it to be the visionary? That is the
perpetual question. I know. We talk about that a lot at our events. Yep.
What I find a lot of times, forget about that. You need to have a strategic vision. You need to have the clarity of vision. You need to build good teams. All of that's there.
Yeah, that's all. But that's leadership, though, for everybody.
It doesn't really matter for the CIO or not. Where I'm looking at, and the way I look at it is, we need to empower our most junior folks to live the day in a life of their customer base and not treat them as customers, but as partners that we're helping make their lives better one way or the other. That's at the most tactical level. So I've tried to instill inside of my department a perspective of even the most junior person, if you can take some time from a training perspective or something along those lines, go work directly with the business. Spend a day with them, whether it's merchandising in the field or whether it's shadowing a winemaker while they go through their steps, or whether it's in the warehouse, or whether it's in the operations centers. Just see what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've noticed is just by doing that, ideas come up, and ideas come up that are not just evolutionary, but can be revolutionary
Yes.
in nature.
Yeah.
Right? So somebody always asks me, Sanjay, do you come up with all the ideas? Does your leadership come up with all the vision and the ideas?
Mm-hmm.
To be honest with you, the most successful model that I think works is these ideas bubble up from everywhere. And you have to create a funnel for these ideas to come up to you, and then you've got to harness them into some sort of a roadmap and a cadence mechanism that takes these ideas and puts them into an execution path that is timely for the business.
Right, because companies, most companies are famous for, coming up with lots of ideas that essentially die on the vine.
Right.
If you'll excuse me stealing the idea of the ag angle here. And it also, what you're talking about too, sounds less like a reimagining of just the CIO role, but more of a reimagining of the entire IT department role, and just the mindset shift that requires.
It is. Don't get me wrong. You're always going to need certain people who are database experts, certain people who are integration experts, certain people. But as a whole,
it's not all pushing buttons. Technology is complicated. Yeah.
Yes, but it's not all about coding. It's not all about database efficiencies. It's not all about your network efficiencies.
Well, it's not about anything happening in a vacuum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it has to be thought together as, I'm trying to achieve a business outcome. I want to influence a business model. I want to take that entrepreneurial mindset. And maybe not 100% of the time, but 20% of the time, I want everybody on my team to start thinking that way, as though they own not just the department, but all technology within the Gallo ecosystem.
Yeah.
And how can they make it better? This is aspirational, obviously.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to do that. Not everyone's going to be able to do that. But if you start talking about it more, if you can get 20, 30% of your population to start doing that, now you don't really have to worry about innovation and being innovative, and you just have to harness it. You
eventually change the culture and the way of thinking in the organization, and that never happens with a memo and a couple of town hall meetings. I mean, that's the same kind of, that's the repetitiveness of the communication of that has to keep happening and happening over time. Well, when you look back on your 4 years so far, since 2014, what stands out in your mind as some of your kind of, and you and your team, the signature accomplishments during that time?
Well, I would say, first, that evolution, that cultural evolution from order taker looking for requirements to being more of a true partner with the business. And now working with the CFO, the COO, the CEO, the ELT, all of these folks in what we call our executive leadership team, looking at IT as potentially being a transformative force within the Gallo ecosystem of companies. Right? That in itself is a huge change, right? That's one. The other part is, that's at the strategic and brand level.
Yeah.
But how do you achieve that, right? One is execution and continuous delivery. I say this to my team all the time. I said, don't focus on the home run. Focus on the single and the double, and hit that single and double every day.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it doesn't really matter. At the end of the year, you'll look up and you'll have put up a massive score out there. And then let me worry about the home run. Right? I will push, our leadership team will push the home run projects. Don't worry about those. Good. You focus on hitting the singles and the doubles on a daily basis. So when we look at the numbers of projects that we've done, and you can't look at this number in isolation, obviously, because there's bigger projects, smaller, but it's a good trending kind of a perspective. We used to do about 100 projects a year. Now we do between 200 to 300 a year. Okay. And it's not as though the size of our team has tripled in size.
Right.
We've grown, but not to that extent, maybe 20% max.
Yeah. That's an efficiency of operations kind of measure in
It's
a
an
way.
efficiency of operations, and it's an efficiency of execution. It's also in this process applying. We put in what I call plan, deliver, run. Same thing as in the industry. You hear plan, build, run, right? Model. From an org perspective, as well as creating focus areas. What we found was that drove a significant amount of these efficiencies because it created focus for people to keep the lights on and kept focus for people to deliver quicker on the larger initiatives or the smaller Lean Six initiatives that they were driving or other initiatives they were driving. And they were the same people who were doing those were not being pulled into doing day-to-day run activities. And the day-to-day run activities, these folks were able to now drive not just the cost point down, but create automation that eliminated the root cause of the problem. Now, the approach I took with all of this is more of a P&G approach, I would say. I'm not looking for radical improvements overnight. They may happen, they may not. It's more about building the culture and making sure you're improving by 1%, 2% every month.
Yeah.
And within 18 months, we saw massive improvements.
A big jump. Well, how did you reorganize, or what new roles did you add? I mean, when you think of your IT department 4 years ago and then today, is the structure different, or
It is.
are there? Tell us a little bit about how you have it set up.
So when we think about IT at Gallo, we used to have simple operations and applications, right? So we've now gone away from two verticals to more of a business-aligned vertical with shared services being consumed by those business verticals that we have. They're IT business verticals. Now, in that, the role of the BRM, the business relationship manager, is what was implemented. That was the big change. And having one centralized leader who is responsible for all things supply chain and operations, one centralized leader who's responsible for all things finance and
The one
HR.
throat to choke philosophy. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. That helps. And then creating a team of business managers under them, which are responsible not for going to the business and saying, what do you want to do? But creating a roadmap saying, this is where we see the technological landscape evolving. This is the capabilities we think we should be chasing. Now, what is your roadmap for this? So it's a challenge with a option of, well, if you don't have a roadmap, we can use this as the foundation to build
Or it's
one.
how do we get on the same page?
Exactly. And that helps drive that, right? So the BRM role was one. The other piece was the run function. Initially having people, if you look at our department, we were running at one point, I think, almost 70-30 or 80-20, where it was 70 or 80% of the department was focused on run activities.
Yeah.
Today, I would say we're probably 50-50. And that's a pretty big shift, right? That 30% that's now going into project work where it wasn't, that's a huge change. My goal with this continuous improvement that we're kind of driving is to get to a 70-30 the other way, where only 30% of the department is running to keep the lights on, and 70% is adding value.
That would be a big shift,
Right?
because when you look at any company, even the ones that work at it for a decade, it's hard to shift that by more than 5%.
So we're close. We've done it 20, 25%. I mean, it depends on how you measure it, but I would say it's enough of a move where I'm seeing the benefit, and I'm seeing it with hard data of increased projects, increased throughput, and the customer pull.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Instead of the customer demand. Traditionally we used to have to demand to be at the table. Now we're being pulled into the table.
Yes.
So now we've got to take that customer pull and make it into even more strategic transformational discussions. And that's where we're kind of headed.
Okay.
But to keep achieving that, to your earlier point, I have to keep figuring out a way to get from 50-50 to maybe 30-70.
Right.
And that's an evolution. Part of it is you can apply technology. You've got automation scripts, you've got workflow scripts, you've got all these things, AI, machine learning, all of this.
Yeah.
I'm just simplifying that into automation, but all of that's there. and you can apply that, but how do you apply that in a consistent way across the enterprise, not in a isolated pocket of excellence?
Right.
That's where that's one of the challenges that I'm seeing.
Well, and I think when I'm, years from now, when I'm talking with CIOs like yourself about looking back on some of the biggest changes, I have a very strong feeling that the automation aspects are going to end up being much bigger than anyone thought, in terms of how much the mind shift can take place on
Absolutely.
the IT side. Let's talk. I want to talk about talent, because I know that talent is a very pressing. When I asked you what your big challenges were, one of your top challenges was talent and how difficult it is sourcing global talent. And I guess then my first thought is you're a California-based winery. Why is global talent something you think about, and why is that a concern?
Well, I like to think of us competing on the world stage. We sell on the world stage. I'd like talent to be. I would like to attract talent from all over the world.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. So those 90 brands are sold outside the United States.
Honestly, there might be 90 active, or I think the last count I saw, and I don't keep count of all this, but I think it's almost up to 140 now, number of brands that we have. It's an ever-evolving number, Mary Fran.
Have you tried every one of them?
Attempted, not succeeded.
Because I was going to volunteer.
It's tough,
Yeah.
right? It's tough.
Yeah.
But when we start looking at that, why is talent so important? One, it's our location. And it's not about
Modesto, California,
which is right next to the Bay Area. So we've got this shining star that's attracting all IT talent all the time. We're in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But we're not in the midst.
You're kind of like
the
the parents. You're out in the suburbs.
That's right. That's one. The other part of it is also, it's not location as much as agriculture. Is it sexy? Does someone wake up one day and say, "Look, I want to go become a winemaker, and I want to sell wine, and I want to work for a company that
Do
does all this"?
people want to move to the farm?
And not
Usually
that we have
not,
farms, but it's just, you know what I mean. It's one of those things. And then how do you change and expose folks to all the amazing technological things that we're doing, so that we can attract the global talent, and then we can keep them there. So the approach we've taken is, we're doing a significant amount of internships. We're going further deep into recruitment. Taking the college football recruitment analogy, right? We're looking already into the freshman, sophomore, junior year, not the senior year, and trying to get interns come through, trying to create this pool and groundswell of folks who are coming through, not just from local universities, but nationally, and see if we can cast a wider net. But the realities of talent is still a problem. I mean, finding data scientists, very difficult. Finding cybersecurity professionals, very difficult. And being able to afford them at the price points that you can sustain.
Because of where you are, you're competing with the tech industry, which is notoriously high paying.
Exactly. And how do you manage that, right? So the way we're trying to do it is, one, get them early, train them up, and provide a career path. Also, there's a lot of attractive things about Gallo. It's a family-owned company. We're not running to Wall Street's, cycle. We're also in it for the very long term. There's strategic investments. There's strategic thinking. There's long-term perspectives that we're applying across the board. And you
have a long track record of success.
Exactly.
I mean, right after the Great Depression is when the brothers got it going.
Right. And it's one of those special places. I mean, I'll be honest with you. It's one of those special companies where you end up and you go, how did I end up here?
Because
in a good way.
When you were with ING Bank, you didn't think that would be your next move.
No, from financial services to Gallo, I did not think that was the...
You didn't want to go to the farm either.
No, it's an attractive, romanticized version of it, right? In your mind, of what a winery looks like and what it functions like.
Yes.
But to be honest with you, it's been everything I could imagine. And for younger folks, I would say, take a chance, because fundamentally, especially millennials, what you think the amount of technology is in the ag space or in a winery, you'd be blown away by all of the digital aspects that actually exist.
Yeah. Well, it could, I would think, be from an innovation standpoint very eye-opening for someone. And is it fair to assume that millennial talent coming in rise up more quickly or have a broader range of responsibility? Because that's one of the, I mean, I'm a parent of two millennials, and I think your kids are a little too young to be millennials. Yeah, but they're whatever the next generation is going to be. But they certainly have a lot of interest in playing a significant role. They want the career path. They want that laid out for them. I mean, all this is quite understandable.
So the approach I take with that is, one, you'll get all the exposure you want. To me, to the leadership, you'll be put on projects that are, some of them are cutting edge. And advancement, yes, but not, I've not focused on titles.
We're not going to make you a VP next year.
Yeah, and I'm not. And there's two ways to skin that cat, right? It's one is be genuine about the work experience and the experience you're gaining, or I stratify this with 27 layers between me and the individual contributor and promote them every 12 months to keep them happy. There's a happy medium of somewhere in that, right? And we're still trying to figure out what that is. But what I've noticed with millennials, at least the ones that work for us, so long as the work is diverse and they feel like they're making an impact to the ecosystem that is Gallo, people are very, very happy.
Yeah, that's a powerful inducement,
right? And
you're feeling appreciated. Yes.
The one area where I think at times is a struggle for IT in general is that clarity of vision, right? Being a private company, Gallo has long-term strategies, long-term roadmaps that are not quarter to quarter. There isn't a radical shift that happens every 2 minutes, where one day you're focusing on cost cutting, next day everyone's asking you about innovation, third day, go back to cost cutting.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
wait,
it's
why
not
aren't you
like
innovative?
The quarterly focus of a publicly held Fortune 500 company. It's very different.
Which also allows for a little more risk-taking. Allows for a little more innovation, allows for a little more long-term planning. And why is that important in technology? It's crucial to be able to sustain a culture that takes a while to build. It isn't something that you do by hiring 4 people and say, go innovate in this room. Right.
Well, and you had mentioned when we talked earlier about how important it is to build out a culture of idea generation. And I like that you don't just throw the word innovation around all loosey-goosey. I mean, when you say innovation, you usually have something very specific it's tied to. But that idea of idea generation is it's very appealing in that it seems like the way that you get more conversation going between all the various parties involved.
Yes.
There was a UCLA professor that I admire greatly, and who said years ago that creativity comes from conversation, and that's, to me, that's very close to the idea. It's like we see that happen at our conferences. People just sitting at a table talking about a problem they're both trying to solve and the different ways they're coming at it, and that's what I think is so important about having diversity in the IT workforce. You want people from different age levels and backgrounds and even educational levels because of that unexpected idea.
Well, what I've found also is how do you create a team? How do you create an engaged team? How do you break that wall between I'm IT and your business and the process, whether it's agile or waterfall or whatever, it all tends to be either artifact driven or some sort of cadence driven process, right? Agile is more cadence, waterfall is more artifact driven. But when you start looking at it, if you distill that down, how do you really create a unified shared vision for innovation or shared ideas? It's through a shared experience set. Right.
Yes.
So if I go out and pick grapes with someone, or I go help him make wine, that shared experience gives us a common language, a common connection at a much more human level than just, hey, go give me your requirements and I'm going to go code something. And, oh, what do you mean this isn't right?
Right. Well, that's more like setting silos next to each other and calling them a team.
Right.
And, I often wonder if you can really create a team, or what you really create is the environment where the team can happen.
So what the approach I like to take is create more shared experiences.
Which is
with
that
a purpose.
Environment. Yeah.
But with a purpose, right? Not just shared experience, let's go to dinner. Yeah, you can do a little bit of that, but that's not
Everybody's done the pizza.
Right.
The pizza
and then
thing,
it becomes like this forced having fun kind of thing.
We're having pizza again.
It's more create that shared experience through, sports analogies, right? You put a goal out there, you put these disparate people together and say, go chase that goal, and then give them the rewards for chasing that. That's motivation, and they'll drive to it, and that's what we're kind of striving towards from an IT perspective.
Yeah,
but it's not easy. It's not easy.
Well, because it's basically about people and relationships. It's time consuming. In fact, I was surprised when you told me about you devote a couple of hours a month to not your directs or even their directs, but more mid-level managers. You are specifically mentoring more deeply in the organization.
Yes.
Is that something that you've done before in your career, or is that new to Gallo?
Well, it's new to Gallo, and it's something every job, every company is different.
Yeah.
Right? So if I had a clarity of vision, me getting up on a board in front or PowerPointing people to death or continually just talking about it is me informing, not having a genuine moment of interaction throughout my department.
Yeah.
So this way, when I meet with the intern who started he gets an hour of my time, and it's not 2 to 3. I think it's closer to 8 to 10 a month is where.
I was thinking the 2 to 3 is per person.
Oh yes,
and you
per
do
person.
it with a couple of people.
Yeah, I do it with about 4 to 5 people roughly on a month. But again,
that's pretty
schedules.
Significant.
But
considering how busy you are.
But you kind of have to. If you want true understanding of your vision, not just the talking points, a true understanding of where you want to take the department, you've got to let a person who would not usually have that ability in a big public forum
or the access to
you to come challenge you on it or ask you questions. And then my job in that 2 to 3 hour interaction, I'll be honest with you, tends to be listen and ask questions. This is why, or help them understand what I was thinking when I said I want to do plan, build, run.
Yeah. Or
what I'm thinking when I say, create a moment of genuine interaction with your business partner. Go live their day in a life. What does that mean? Because when someone says go live your day in a life, that's great. Coming from the CIO, wonderful. I've got 47 tasks to do. What does my CIO know? When do I have time?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And so my conversation, okay, let's look at those 47 tasks. Can we optimize some of them? Can some of them, are they real tasks or are they busy work? So it's that level of granular discussion that you can do.
Yeah.
And you can influence, because these people then potentially go talk to other folks and they can influence. But this is more of the long-term bet I'm doing.
Yeah.
Training, working, helping connect at all levels within the IT department, because that way I know that my vision is truly being explained. And it's not being interpreted.
Well, and it's sinking into the organization in ways that it becomes just part of that new habit formation, the shifting, the mind shift sort of thing.
And it doesn't really matter, Mary Fran. I'm not expecting it to be 100% understood and 100% accepted.
Yeah.
It's just increasing that percentage of acceptance and understanding.
Right. Now, we mentioned a few times you've mentioned the IoT, and in our recent event in Atlanta, you told a great story on stage, and it was about one of the downsides of digital transformation, and it had to do with drip irrigation using IoT sensors across 10 acres.
No, so we were, using sensors to manage irrigation, and we didn't realize that, these sensors rodents can eat the wires and
the wires turned out to be tasty, right?
yes, I guess
Because
they're
of the
attractive.
nutrients.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It just is. There's all sorts of theories there. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the sci-fi one that they create a electrical charge that a field that attracts them. But I don't know if
okay.
that's true. All I know is that we had a lot more sensors, and a lot more sensors were eaten. So
Okay. So
what
they were
ends-
tasty for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we're getting at is this is the reality of applying technology in
In the real world.
the real world. I mean, this is an extreme case of it, but there's other aspects too. When we start looking at in a manufacturing environment, we've got a glass plant. Applying technology there. It's high. It's very hot.
Yes.
How do we have sensors? How do we make sure that robots, automation work there?
Yeah.
That's also some of these things that we have to consider, right? It all looks great on a piece of paper when you're designing it in the cool comfort of an architecture.
Well, there's a great
meeting.
deal of science, actual real science involved in agriculture.
Yes.
Which, of course, when from financial services and software building, you don't have to concern yourself as much with that. Those factors probably don't come in. You'd mentioned a few times when I've heard you frame conversations around your 5 pillars when we were talking about the digital ecosystem. And I wanted you to just briefly describe them and talk about how you're investing in them. The one of them you already mentioned, the sales call of the future, is one of the pillars.
Absolutely. So it doesn't come necessarily from the digital ecosystem. This started as an idea when I was looking at the Gallo enterprise.
Oh, okay.
And it logically is the digital ecosystem because
Yeah.
the enterprise is the ecosystem for all intents and purposes. And how do we digitize it? But when I look at the Gallo ecosystem, we had a lot of individual applications owned by individual app owners. And we could continue to support that. But I wanted to change the conversation into more holistic platform discussions, right? So invest in the sales platform, the grower platform, the marketing platform, the manufacturing platform, or the automation platforms.
Okay.
So how do I change that conversation, and how did I do that without using the word digital ever?
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
So the idea was I would have 5 pillars that we'd be investing in.
And they're all business delivery
They're
pillars.
business delivery
essentially.
pillars
Okay.
tied to business verticals.
Right.
Or horizontals. It depends on how you're organized. So you've got sales call of the future, grower call of the future for the ag side of the business, marketing in the digital age for marketing, obviously, manufacturing in the digital age for both supply chain and operations, and automation of white collar. That's kind of a all-encompassing.
That's a future of work kind of category.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot that is said today about robotics and automation, and we don't need forklift drivers, or we don't need
Self-driving
self-driving. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean,
Yeah.
look, I don't think that's real, and I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen
that quickly.
Yeah.
But I do think all focus tends to be on automation of blue collar. I think the bigger opportunity is automation on the white collar work. There's a tremendous amount of analytics that gets done, a tremendous amount of report generation that gets done, a tremendous amount of monitoring of systems that gets done.
Isn't some of it already being done?
Some of it, but
Okay.
there's not as much of a focus on it as much as at least I've not seen that tremendous focus. By allowing this 5th pillar to be existing in my strategy for digital ecosystem evolution, it creates a focus so that the lens of the road mapping that we talked about, of the interaction cadences that we talked about,
Yeah.
how does automation of white collar work? It's at the forefront of every discussion.
Interesting.
And that way you change it. Now, that's not we're not suggesting tomorrow everything gets automated. I'm just suggesting something that was value added 20 years ago has become rote today. How do you take that rote and eliminate it from a human needing to do it?
Right. Yeah.
And then allow that human to go work on
Well,
something
and
else.
so much of that has been happening in data center technologies where you just don't need the people doing it anymore. It comes down to literally the one button pushing happening. And some of this kind of leads me into asking you about innovation. I know one of the things that I thought was amusing when you were talking at our Atlanta event, and you basically said, we got to stop talking about innovating everywhere and start talking about business outcomes. And that, it sounds like that's something of a mantra of yours at Gallo. That's how you engage with the other business executives. You don't throw the I word around a lot.
No, I don't.
Okay.
And there's a reason for it, right? When we look at innovation, for example, right? I break innovation into two types. There's innovation through perspiration, which is the evolutionary innovation that we talk about, right?
Yeah.
There's
The
marginal,
slow and steady improvements.
of existing. And then there's the flash of genius.
Yep.
I'm not a genius, and I've not had any flashes of genius anytime. So I would rather leave that up to somebody else, come up with a flash of genius, and I'll follow quickly behind, or create a culture where a flash of genius may occur, right? But everything that my department's focusing on is on evolutionary innovation. That's something we can achieve.
Yeah.
And something we can control.
And you can measure it.
And you can measure success. The other part of this is, we have to tie that back to something that your enterprise exists on, right? Fundamentally, any enterprise, it's not Gallo, needs to sell more stuff and make it more cheaply, right? At its essence, if you distill everything down, unless it's a NGO of some sort and there's some social aspects that they're trying to, that might be the third pillar. I don't know.
Yeah.
But most public companies, most private companies, they want to sell more of whatever product they're making and make that product more efficiently. Right? If you distill that down. So if you use those two as the business outcomes, then there's tertiary business outcomes all related to that. How do you tie all technological innovation or technological projects or technological thought, road mapping to that fundamental outcome and start thinking that way? Then your investments become straightforward, right? Then your prioritization becomes straightforward. Then your discussion around what is important versus what is necessary becomes easier. It's not emotional. It's not political. It's not.
You're not spending a lot of time creating an atmosphere of genius combustibility, where that flash is going to happen.
Right. And that person's special because he came up with all the ideas.
This is the innovation team and they get the really nice room with the great views.
Exactly. Because everybody should be innovating in your department. Everybody. It's all about raising the water table so that everything rises along with it.
Well, but then again, there's been a lot written about the kind of innovation that's going on at Gallo, like the communities that you've created, the grower portals. And maybe these are just obvious innovations, but to your growers, there's something, that's innovative to them.
So this is where it is, right? When you're on a journey of evolutionary innovation, if you're on the journey, you don't realize the 10th innovation that you've put out there. If you come in from the outside and look at that 10th one, you go, wow, that's revolutionary.
Yeah. Or if someone dropped in who knew you 5 years ago and then they come in now, they're like,
wow, this is so different.
The place is loaded with innovation.
Right. But at the same time, we don't go and chase the home run, like I said, right?
Yeah.
It's slow, steady, and then it feeds itself.
Well, didn't the mobile scheduling app, didn't that seem pretty innovative out in the field to your growers?
It did.
Okay.
It did. For the grower reps, it was. But we chased it for 2 years.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't overnight that this was successful.
No
it
flash
took
of
2
genius
years.
and suddenly it was there.
Yeah, and it wasn't some guy in a basement who came up with it, coded it overnight, and here you go.
Yeah.
It was more of that.
It was the 99% perspiration leading you to the innovation.
I mean,
fair enough.
The other part of it is I would love to have a flash of genius that we've got done in a week.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that that's a little mythology.
Well, and that's like assuming that you can come up with a simple answer to a complex problem because they're usually wrong.
Yeah.
Those things. Yeah.
And it's okay. I mean, the other part of it is what innovation. The reason I don't like to use that word too much is I want to focus on how technology can change the fundamental core of your business model. Right? That's a different approach too.
And you have to at the same time be changing the culture.
Exactly.
Yeah, because everybody's got to be on board for that.
And
yeah,
if you don't do, if you look at what's happened in the last 20 years, the Amazons, the Ubers, the Airbnbs, the Zappos, you name it, right?
Yeah.
Zappos from a cultural perspective, Amazon from the e-com perspective.
Uber from what it did to the taxi industry.
Yeah, all of these are out there. Disruption is just a natural fact. So but if you notice, every disruption right now is happening because of technology. Recently, at least it feels that way.
It's very digitally based, and it relies on social media and the public internet. Yep.
But you go back 30 years, 40 years, it was other things that were driving innovation, right?
Yeah.
It was more education based. It was more people got educated. The women came into the workforce. They got diversity. There's all different types of impetuses for innovation. We just happen to be in a time where technology is taking the forefront of it all.
Right.
And so
it's a good time to be a CIO.
It's a good time to be a CIO, and it's a good time to be in technology. The other thing also is if you want a seat at the table with the boards or with your executive leadership team, you have to talk in terms of business model. You have to talk in terms of transforming the company. You cannot, and deliver on those through the tools that you have. Me being a CIO, me being a technologist, my tools are technology.
Yeah.
So that's how I talk that language. And that's how I try to add value to the company.
Well, and I'll maintain for a long time that it is a unique value that CIOs can bring to the C-suite, to that discussion, is, essentially it's that solution that nobody knew they always wanted. You come in and you say, well, here's actually a way to do this 20% cheaper using this technology that they didn't necessarily know about because it's not in their field of vision. I think the CIOs and IT executives in general, their field of vision is, there's so many things. It's not a static environment out there. There's so many things changing. How do you keep up with things, you're close enough to Silicon Valley. Do you do tours a couple times a year through the VC shops? I mean, how do you keep on top of stuff?
This is going to sound funny. I kind of do, but I kind of don't. It's very difficult. So, and it's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but look, inherently, am I on top of all the digital innovation that is happening out there? Absolutely not.
Well, and that's not what I asked you.
I know. But how do I keep in touch with what is happening in the change? One is reading. I read a lot of stuff.
As a lifelong editor, I'm very happy to hear that. Good.
It's just constant.
Yay for
right?
reading.
Whether it be periodicals or articles or analyst research, all of it.
Yep.
The other part is, yes, I do create a network that I rely upon. VCs, whether it be VCs, other CIOs, other technologists that, we communicate back on, hey, have you seen this? This is kind of cool. What's going on?
Yeah.
But then the third part is I'm not trying to keep up with the Joneses on technology. I'm only trying to keep up with the Joneses on technology if it can change the business model of my company.
Okay.
So that's, I'm also not chasing the most shiny new object out there.
Yeah. And when you refer to changing the business model of the company, what are you thinking about exactly? Because, you make wine and you sell wine. So that's when you strip it all down, that's the business model. How could that substantively change?
So you make wine, you sell wine, but how you sell wine is different.
Okay.
Across states, across geographies, across international geographies.
And where and how you sell it.
Where, how. The other part is we're an ecosystem company that has potential for a lot of things. We're vertically integrated from the sand mine to the some of the distributors that sell the wine, right, to the retailer. Why not leverage data analytics to create social experiences through that process to help sell wine. This is a different business model. This is not the traditional make wine, sell wine in a three-tier system.
Fair enough.
Right?
Yep.
Create more experiences. Does that mean we become the Disneyland of wine? I don't know. Probably far-fetched from that. But
Yeah.
you get what I'm getting at.
Yes.
It's that change, right? The other aspect is the consumer behavior is changing. Right? Online purchasing is going up. Direct-to-consumer is going up. Click and collect is going up. Delivery from Drizzly and Uber Eats and all of that's increasing.
Yeah.
How do we change our business model to facilitate that we're a player in all of it?
Okay.
Right? That's the fundamental. And when I say change your business model, does it mean we need to focus on efficiencies in the manufacturing more?
Right.
Do I need to increase top line by having more digital campaigns, digital presence, activation? Do I need to focus on manufacturing in the digital age more than I am today? So when I look at those 5 platforms, I've also been able to talk to our business and say, look, I am not scaled to invest in all 5 at any given time. I can do 1, maybe 2.
True. Yeah, you can't have 5 top priorities. Because
If you
then
decide,
you're too divided. Yeah.
If you decide sales call of the future is the thing we're going to chase, then I can do 1 more. Is that grower call of the future? Is that marketing in the digital age? Is that manufacturing? Or is that automation? I can pick one of them.
Yeah.
So, and everyone's well, they're all important. Well,
right,
yes,
right.
everything's
like,
important.
pick mine.
But it allows for, to your earlier question, how do I change the business mindset and the interaction? It's through that, by creating that unified vision, by giving them options, and then applying.
You're giving people lots to talk about, and creativity comes from conversation.
Right.
So it sounds like a pretty good strategy.
Well, it seems to be working so far.
Yes.
We'll see.
Well, all right. Well, and I'm just very sorry that we weren't doing this conversation with a nice glass of one of your 90 wines in our hands. I feel like I overlooked something really important here. Thank you very much for joining us here today, Sanjay. And I will, if you are joining us online and you've missed any parts of this fabulous conversation with Sanjay Sringapur of Gallo Winery, you can find it tomorrow. You'll see this on CIO.com. And we also post an audio podcast of this interview on iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud. And next week, we have another episode of CIO Leadership Live coming up. My guest will be, we'll be talking about drinking coffee instead of wine. I will have Jack Clare, the CIO and the Chief Strategy Officer of Dunkin' Brands, joining me next Thursday, May 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So thanks very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you back here soon.